Hello everyone, Zelrant here, and today Robella has dropped with her entire kit and all its numbers. And so we took a quick look at it in my stream last night, but it wasn't complete at that point, so I didn't really go in too far in depth in it. But now everything looks to be updated on here, so I thought we'd go over her kit as well as her dupes, then her fixed keys, is her common key, and then we'll kind of give my thoughts towards the end here. So the first thing you'll need to know is all of these, like the main buffs slash debuffs that are kind of within our kit, and that's going to be Resonant Link, Deep Insight, Frost Invasion, and Exposed Weakness. These are kind of key in how her entire rotation is going to work. It's going to work a little bit different than my last video when we didn't have the numbers, but it's got pretty much a similar style to it. So we're going to look at those as we go over them in her kit. And the big thing we want to look at first here, though, is her basic attack is your standard basic attack here. Nothing too crazy there. But we do have her first skill here. I think this is going to be the most important one to look at first because her passive is going to kind of deal with everything that this is doing here. And so this one is a 0 cooldown, 0 confectance index skill. You can do it every single turn, and it gives extra commands. So after she does it, she can do something immediately after she does it. But there's really nothing too crazy with this one. It only can be used once per round. But basically, you select an ally within an 8-tile radius and applies Resonant Link, one of those skills or buffs I mentioned above. Only one of them can exist at the same time, so if you decide to select another ally and apply this to it, it's going to drop off the one that you put it on the first time. And then after it puts that on the ally, after she does this, she can then go again. And you only can do this one time per round, which makes sense because you can only have it on one person anyway. Now, what Resonant Links does to that ally is increases the freeze damage by her attack by 10%. Basic stats there. But the key part is the second part here. After that person that has it deals damage to the enemy with an active attack or interception. Interception is the key point there because interception is basically what Macchiato does when the enemy attacks and then she attacks back. Robella will apply 1 stack of Deep Insight to the enemy, and then applies an additional stack if the holder deals freeze damage, which is going to make it very key on Macchiato, because this can also apply to another unit if they're not freeze. Another big one that you can think of would be like Jianzhu, who does a lot of interception type attacks too, but she's electric. But the big thing is that freeze one makes it have an additional stack, and that's going to be quite important on that Deep Insight stacks, because when you look at Deep Insight, it can stack up to 6 times. And what Deep Insight does is the more stacks you have of this, her Frost Invasion will increase its multiplier by 3% per stack, or up to 18%. And how Deep Insight, after that, let's look at the rest of this here. And then after skill usage deals freeze damage equivalent to 20% of Robella's attack. So then she does additional attacks. So it's basically buffing up your other character. This is going to be key to pretty much put on Macchiato. In the Ice team, you're putting this on Macchiato, and that's it. You put it on her, and she's going to do it all for you. Then you have the Deep Insight. Basically, it does Frost Invasion at the end of the enemy's turn, and Frost Invasion performs an attack dealing freeze damage equivalent to 150% attack and 2 stability. So there's a lot to digest here at this first skill. But ultimately, what it means is you're going to put this Resonant Link on a unit. The best unit's going to be Macchiato on the Ice team for sure. Macchiato is going to do damage and apply, if it does ice damage, she's going to apply 2 stacks at Deep Insight. And then if she does interceptions when the enemy's doing attack damage, she's going to put another 2 stacks. And you can do that, you can get up to 6 stacks on the enemy this way. And then if you have 6 stacks of it, you get an increased damage to her Frost Invasion of 18%, or whatever your stacks are. And then at the end of the enemy's turn, she's basically going to do that freeze damage equivalent of 150% attack to the enemy. That's how all of those work alongside this. So that's going to be something that happens every turn. Now, where it's really important, though, is in her passive now, because there's more to it. In her passive is after using that Frost Invasion. So after you do all that damage Frost Invasion, those Deep Insight stacks that you've accumulated are going to get removed from the target. But then she gains an equal number of stacks of a new buff, called Exposed Weakness. So Robella will get Exposed Weakness buff on herself. And then when the number of stacks of Exposed Weakness is more than 2, basic attacks deals freeze damage instead and increases crit rate by 20%. So nice little buff there. She gets that. And then when we look at what else Exposed Weakness has on it, increases the damage multiplier of Super Shot, which is her basic, and Hallowing Chill by 9%. That's her ultimate. This can be stacked up to 10 times, so a 90% damage increase. And so as you can already tell, her basic attack's actually going to be kind of key in her kit because she can do a lot of damage with it. Now, you're going to see when we get into dupes, you can remove this limit. And this thing does not go away, meaning you can stack this unlimited amount of times. That's going to be very key in her kit, though. But we'll get to that when we get to it. So that is her first skill. Now, we've already kind of talked about her passive here. She gets that exposed weakness. So let's go to her second skill here. Radiant Memory. Active buff. Robella gains Radiant Extension for 2 rounds, which duration decreases at the end of the current round. After skill usage, Robella gains Frost Barrier for 2 turns. Frost Barrier absorbs 65% of Robella's initial attack up to a maximum of 60% of the target's HP. This one has a cooldown of 3 turns. The real key thing in this skill here is going to be Radiant Ascension. And that is, it upgrades Resonant Link and Deep Insight to enhance Resonant Link and enhance Deep Insight, which increases damage dealt to by self by 30%. The big thing with those enhanced ones as well is it's the same thing, except they have bigger numbers on those percentages. So just take the original ones and they're amplified. And so you're going to want to do this whenever this skill is available. Now you also have the Frost Barrier it puts on her. I think the Frost Barrier is really nothing at all that crazy, especially after we see Suomi's expansion key, which basically makes it where shields are going to be on your allies at all times pretty much. So realistically, you're only casting it for that Radiant Extension, but as soon as it's available, you do want to use it. So you have that, and then you have her ultimate here, which is a big AoE, as you can see over here. This one has a Confectance cost of 4, and this is what you're basically waiting for at the end of action. Increases Confectance index by 1 point, so you're going to get this one every turn. Selects one direction around self and deals AoE freeze damage equivalent to 120% attack to all enemy targets in a 4-tile fan-shaped area. And this can do massive AoE damage to a lot of units, especially when you're stacking that exposed weakness that you have down here. Now that is the entirety of her kit here. It's fairly simple in the rotation, in my opinion. You're basically going to start off the bat getting Light of Bond, putting that on Macchiato. Macchiato is like the one you put this on. Macchiato gets you those stacks of Deep Insight, and then when at the end of the enemy's turn, she's going to do big ice damage. She's going to get exposed weakness stacking up on that, and then you're kind of rinse and repeat through Radiant Memory, and once your ult's available, use your ult when that's available, and it's going to do big damage based on her exposed weakness, and then you just kind of rinse and repeat. And eventually, if you don't have anything available, just use your basic attack, because her basic attack is getting very, very strong with those exposed weakness stacks. So that is kind of her kit there. I think it's fairly straightforward, but let's go ahead and look at the dupes now, because the dupes, to me, don't do anything crazy, but the V6 is kind of where you can see where she can do some massive, massive damage. And then after we get through all of this, we'll talk a little bit more, though, of some issues with her overall kit. So we have the V1, increases attack by 20% of the selected ally's attack for 1 initial attack for self. So this applies to basically whoever she puts the buff on, which is going to almost certainly be Macchiato on the ice team. So just a nice little buff there. Nothing too crazy, though. Upgrade 2, or V2, Radiant Ascension increases damage dealt by 50% now. So rather than, I think it was 30%, it's now 50%. Where is it here? Yeah, Radiant... Oh, yeah, I gotta look at the buff up here. Radiant Ascension, yeah, it's 30%, so it makes it now 50%, so it's a 20% damage increase there. Enhances the effects of Radiant Ascension. When using Frost Invasion, applies 1 stack of Memory Shock. So now you have a new little debuff going to the enemy called Memory Shock. Decreases movement speed by 1 tile. This can be stacked up to 5 times. It counts as a frigid effect. I mean, movement has not been an issue in the game yet. I'm wondering if there's content that's really requiring you to freeze them in place. Because with this, basically, you're going to be able to freeze enemies in place with this, from what I can tell. How important that's going to be, who knows? But that's basically what you're getting there. Then we have V3. When the number of stacks of exposed weakness is more than 5, so we already had one that was more than 2. But now if it's more than 5, crit damage is increased by 30%, and damage dealt by Frozen Invasion. So it just makes her overall damage a lot higher there. Then you have V4, increases damage multiplier by attack by 150%, And then for each stack of exposed weakness, increases damage multiplier by 9%. So this one's kind of a little bit weird because I think it might have been, let's see, it already mentions 9% here, so I'm wondering if it's an additional here. But I just know it's increasing the amount of damage you're getting per exposed weakness stack overall on this. So this one is pretty nice on the damage here, but realistically, it's not going to be that nice until you get to the last dupe here. But first you have V5, increases the duration of Radiant Ascension by 2 rounds. So now it lasts longer, so she's got that enhanced damage. So all of those buffs, like I said before, are now enhanced, and they're going to pretty much stay in that state because it lasts for 2 turns, and it has a 3-turn cooldown. But then you have the big one, which is her V6, which is exposed weakness, no longer has a stack limit. And this is a buff that is permanent, meaning you can infinitely stack this. I mean, if you have infinite rounds, or in this case, if you're doing like Gunsmoke Frontline, you have basically those 6 turns to stack it, and if you can do all 6 stacks, so you can get 6 stacks of Deep Insight, which gets converted to exposed weakness. So if you can do that every single turn, on turn 7 with V6, you should be able to get up to 36 stacks of exposed weakness. And if you have 36 stacks of exposed weakness, you basically have a 9% times 36. So what is that? 306, not 360, but like 320% damage increase to her ultimate and her basic attack. So a massive damage increase with her V6. And it's a ramping up damage, meaning she's going to do a lot of damage on her. She's going to do damage on her first turn. Second turn, she's going to do even more. Third turn, it's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger damage, doing a lot of damage at the final turn. Then we have our fixed keys down here. So fixed key 1, before allies with Resonant Link launches an active attack or interception, applies defense down on the target for 2 turns. This one is going to be very nice because now you have defense down in your ice team, defense down 2. So that is going to be, in a lot of cases, your must have there. Because as the ice team's kind of coming together, if you're not throwing like a Klukai in there or someone else that does defense down, you're going to want this on her. So I really like that fixed key, and that actually makes her kind of valuable for outside the ice team to an extent. If you're really kind of putting a ragtag team together, just having that defense down, and she can do some decent damage, even if the person doing the interceptions, like a Jianzhu is doing hers. Yeah, her damage is going to be a little bit lower, but now you're at least getting defense down buff from that, which that's nice there. At the end of action, if Robella has Radiant Extension, gains attack up for 1 turn. So this one's giving her attack up if she uses her 1 ability to give a Radiant Extension. That one's all right there, some more damage. You have fixed key 3, Super Shot. After skill usage, gains 2 stacks of exposed weakness. So, like I already was saying, this one's now, if you have... so if you look at this... This no longer has a stack limit, so this is a way to stack it even more. I don't know how important this is going to be if you're not V6, but if you're V6, I think this one will be key in really ramping your damage up even more, because now you're getting an additional every 2 stacks at V6 is what, 18% damage increase? Yep, so it's 9, so 2 stacks of that, so 18%. And if you're not going to, this is something you're not going to trigger every single turn. But if you no longer have a stack limit, I mean, that one's just going to be nice over all the halves. So I think this one's going to be more key for a V6, but more ways to get that stacks. You have fixed key 4. If Robella or allies with Resonant Link deals freeze damage towards enemies with a shield, increases shield penetration by 30% and damage by 20. So that one's going to be situational, but now you have some shield penetration, so that one's nice there. If Robella or an allied is on an allied frost tile, gains 5 tiles of additional movement after Super Shot or Howling Will. Chill. To me, this is kind of that, this is like maybe to me like a PvP one or something. Like you set up some ice tiles behind the enemy, she goes into those ice tiles, hits them in the back, and now she can escape and get to safety from there. So that one can be nice. I think it's more of a PvP type thing, because that's usually where I want to get to them exposed so I can kill them, and then also take cover so they don't get killed themselves. So, situational, but I could see it being nice there. Fixed key 6. Before using Frozen Invasion, dispels 2 buffs from the target. I mean, we have a Gunsmoke boss right now where you want to remove buffs. So, here's a way to dispel buffs. Nice one there. Affinity key, attack, HP, and crit damage. nothing crazy there. I think attack HP, this may be good for who is it? I mean, it's going to be decent on her, but I think Springfield wouldn't mind that one, if I'm not mistaken. What does Springfield want? HP. Well, she likes HP and crit. I don't know if... I don't think attack helps her that much, but it might be good on her. Kind of have to mess with that, but nothing too crazy. I mean, it's nothing too crazy on the Infinity one there. And then you have her common key, attack plus 5%. If the holder has a shield, increases phase damage dealt by 10%. So it's a 10% here. If you're using Suomi in your team, this one's going to be good on whoever your main damage dealer is. So I do like that common key. That's a really good pickup there. The last thing we want to look at is her weapon, and this one's kind of a big one. I'll have to see, but what they're saying is Svarog, or the free weapon we're getting from Gunsmoke for Papashaw's weapon, is better than her own. I'm going to guess it's because it has the buffs for units doing those support actions. So that one is actually really nice on her. But then hers is Wanderer's Bolid, and this one's more targeted towards her versus this one being more of a supportive weapon towards Macchiato. But this one increases her freeze damage by however many dupes you have. After launching an out-of-turn attack, increases damage of out-of-turn attacks by whatever percentage based on how many copies you have, up to a maximum of that. So this one increases her personal damage, while Svarog is going to be more of your Macchiato. And ultimately, looking at her kit, I think it's more beneficial for her to be buffing up Macchiato, because that's like 90% of her kit. She does a lot of damage herself, but Svarog is going to make it where she can make Macchiato do even more as well. But you have hers as well if for some reason you're using Papashot within her team. So that's her entire kit. And so now the big thing that I kind of look at here, though, is this one is a little bit tricky, and this one is kind of whale bait, I think, on Robella's kit. And the reason is getting those deep insight stacks. Now, we do have the nicety, at least. When I originally read this, I did not see the second part here where it says applies an additional stack if the holder deals freeze damage. So your normal Macchiato can apply, so she can do 2 support action interceptions plus her normal attack. And so with that, she can put 5 stacks on them. Now the max is 6 though. The max stacks you can get is 6. And guess what Macchiato can do at her V2? She can do 3 interceptions. And so you kind of have the bait there to try and at least get her to the V2, but it becomes even... So we have that to get those max stacks up. So you kind of have the whale bait of you wanting not only to get duped for Robella to get her V6, so that she doesn't have to worry about that exposed weakness stack limit, because that's what's going to really ramp up her own personal damage. But you're also wanting Macchiato to have at least V2, so that you can max out the deep insight here. Now, you can max it on some of the turns when she does freeze damage, though. She does freeze damage with her... Macchiato does freeze damage with her S1. So this one is freeze damage, but her skill 2 is not freeze damage, and her basic is... Well, I think it converts it, but basically her skill 2 is not. So it's kind of tricky in that if you really want to make sure you're always getting the max stacks here, you want to have her at V2. It's not, I don't think it's completely necessary. Some people are thinking it's completely necessary, but I don't think it is, especially if you're not planning on getting her to V6, because the big thing is if you push her to V6, you want to get that max stacked every time, because that's what's going to really ramp up her damage, is just putting a ton of these exposed weakness stacks on them. It's kind of the same reason why Shahua is so good. It's because you have Scorch Mark no longer has a stack limit, and then when you get to her V6, it increases the damage magnitude of it by a lot. And if you've seen any of the videos of her when you have the maximum amount of stacks, I think it's like 40 or something, she just annihilates the enemy. She does like 80,000 plus damage in just that one hit. And so Robella is going to be in a similar situation in that case, where if you can get a lot of stacks of exposed weakness on her, you can see her basic attack doing a massive amount of damage. Now, I haven't tested it. We'll have to actually see testing from the people on the CN side. So I will be doing another video on a follow-up once I see the numbers coming out of CN on her. But overall, that is her kit. But overall, I like the kit. I think it works. Like, I don't think I've seen some people saying it's not usable at all without dupes. I don't think she's going to be. She's not going to be meta defining. I don't think in terms of damage. She's actually making Macchiato even better, especially at V0. Her own personal damage is going to be decent, but Macchiato is still your key damage dealer within the team, and Macchiato is going to be doing the bulk of the damage. She's given her a lot of buffs, and then she's just doing some damage on top of Macchiato. But overall, that is her kit. That are just some of my thoughts. Let me know if your thoughts on Robella is someone that you're looking forward to, or do you think she's not that good? But yeah, that's pretty much it. If you like my content, if you could like, comment, subscribe, it really helps. And thanks for watching.